Chances are you already know what you're getting with Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. This is the third time we've seen The Legend of Zelda cross over with Koei Tecmo's Warriors franchise, and truth be told, the two partners have become remarkably good at making these games, which are by their very nature a rather known quantity. For our money, the first Hyrule Warriors was one of the most interesting takes on the one versus many Musou genre. It treated the Musou setup as a foundation and then used the trappings and concepts of The Legend of Zelda as icing on that proven tasty cake. That ended up to be a pretty convincing formula, with the Zelda trappings meshing better with Warriors than the likes of Fire Emblem or One Piece, ultimately serving to elevate the deliberately simplistic and junk foodian nature of the hack-and-slash battles. Where the first game mashed up Zelda imagery from across the decades, 2020's Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity continued on the same path, but channeled the worldview of a single entry, Breath of the Wild, offering a non-canon alternative universe take on that game's events. Now we have Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which itself offers a further twist. This time, rather than a curious alternate retelling of a game you already love, this latest Hyrule Warriors will fill gaps in Tears of the Kingdom's backstory in a canonical manner. That leaves the developers with quite a bit of room to maneuver. In Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda gets zapped back in time to ancient Hyrule, while Link is stuck in the present. Over the course of that journey, you do indeed figure out the broad brushstrokes of what happens in Zelda's journey through the past, but much of ancient Hyrule is left to the imagination. Age of Imprisonment focuses on that, presenting a specific Zelda-led narrative covering a new version of the Imprisoning War, a formative event in the series' legend. Your mileage with this will probably vary. A curious thing about the setup of Age of Imprisonment is that it heavily relies on your having become well invested in some of the supporting cast of Tears of the Kingdom. How interested you feel in the trials and tribulations of King Rauru, Queen Sonia, Minero and the like, especially when we've already seen their story brought to completion in Tears of the Kingdom, is likely to heavily impact how much you enjoy this title's narrative, and in turn, how invested you feel. You can probably sense from the tone of this piece that it's not all perfect. It's all fine, and it's certainly one of the most in-depth Hylian narratives ever presented, especially seeing as the best thing about this is that it is Zelda's story first and foremost. A real chance for that character to shine as a lead in a truly narrative-driven game. But the more you play, the more you realise that perhaps it's time for the Breath of the Wild version of the Zelda universe to set sail into the sunset. The first game in this universe came out over 8 years ago now, and it feels like the series is ready to tackle pastures new, as it often does. Tears of the Kingdom really was a perfectly fine coda to that version of Link, Zelda, and Hyrule, and their inclusion in Age of Imprisonment simply reinforces that feeling. The story still intrigues though, especially when it feels like it's breaking with Zelda's hands-off franchise tradition. Quite often you're treated to a cinematic walk through a zone as characters chatter, for instance, something that might feel cloying to some, but to others a nice counterpoint to the storytelling that this series usually dabbles in. These moments certainly still feel strange, for this graphically looks so identical to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that, at a glance, these calmer, in-gameplay story moments where you're not slashing up hundreds of enemy troops give the glorious vibe of the world's most expensive ROM hack. With all that said, Age of Imprisonment does have an ace up its tunic sleeve, and that is the fact that it's the most expansive and satisfying Musou crossover spin-off ever. This is the best one of these games has ever been, and as a result, the actual combat and gameplay will propel most people through the game way more than the story. Obviously, this game is a direct spin-off from Tears of the Kingdom, and so much of its mechanical richness comes from a thoughtful interpretation and translation of that game's system into the Warriors format. Mechanical is the right word, since so much of this begins with the Zonai devices, the mysterious ancient technology that is replete in Tears of the Kingdom's world. Here, Zonai devices can be equipped to your warrior of choice, adding both unique special moves and an elemental factor into combat. That means flamethrowers and gushing water hydrants abound, for instance. This sort of thing can be used not only to battle enemies directly, but also to solve minor puzzles or engage in a bit of battlefield control. Some of the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom systems live on here in terms of how various elemental powers can interact with the world to impressive and useful effect. On top of all this, some enemies have straight up elemental weaknesses, which means you'll be thinking carefully not only about the selection of warriors you bring into battle, but also what Zonai devices are equipped to which of your fighters. There's an emphasis on the characters too, with things like sync strike attacks where different pairings offer up a variety of outcomes in terms of the resulting attacks. Battery becomes another resource you must manage through the ebb and flow of a battle too. Ultimately, it's satisfying stuff that builds nicely on ideas from the previous title. Many structural elements are meanwhile directly retained from Age of Calamity, such as the broad strokes of character progression and a world map which is used to enter missions, purchase upgrades, and otherwise manage your progress. Where Age of Calamity broke things up with the spectacle of some battles where you pilot divine beasts, here there's a suitably showy replacement that I won't mention for spoiler reasons, which is a fun distraction that feels like it's dropped out of a different genre altogether. This all feels like a build-up of systems that enhances what Warriors offers by default, and the end result is something more engaging and satisfying than other games of this type. It's another one of these games, sure, but it's one of the best that the Musou/Warriors genre has seen. Oh, and here's a bonus. This is one of those games that runs well, something that Warriors games, even on higher-end consoles, have struggled to do in the past. This is really great though, maintaining a solid and high frame rate even when hundreds of troops are bouncing around on screen. Dynasty Warriors and its kin are often thought of as the gaming equivalent of an extremely stupid popcorn action flick. You turn your brain off and turn a few thousand troops into bloodless mush. It's satisfying. They're easy to play, so they're great for kids or for hangovers. Sure, your attention might start to drift more or less every single time a cutscene begins to play, but in the end, that has never been what these games have been particularly good at, and grafting in the Zelda IP doesn't really change that either. It does open up a very welcome enriching of that iconic gameplay though, making Age of Imprisonment the richest offering in the series yet. Thank you so much for watching this little video about Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a like, subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games. Goodbye!